Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. This episode of Amateur Traveler is sponsored by mytravelcreditcard.com. Check out mytravelcreditcard.com for some travel credit cards that we have chosen just for you. One card, for instance, that we're featuring right now will get you 60,000 reward points. Will get you into hundreds of airport lounges for free. Will also save you $200 with Uber credits and up to $200 in airline fees as well. For your travel credit card needs, go to mytravelcreditcard.com.
I got my bags packed and on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 678. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about railway stations and cathedrals and castles, port wine, and a festival where you want to bring a little tiny plastic hammer as we go to Porto in Portugal. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Let's talk about Porto. I'd like to welcome to the show Reis and Sara Silva from NoFootprintNomads.com, who've come to talk to us about Porto, Portugal. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
And we should first say that Jay is not really your first name, but I have failed so miserably pronouncing your name in the pre-show that you've allowed me to call you that. Could you pronounce your first name for me one time so that we can hear it on the air here?
So right name is João Reis. But I just say Jay just to make it easier because it's quite a difficult sound for non-Portuguese speakers to say.
And
so
I
that's
am
fine.
qualified as a non-Portuguese speaker. I think that is fair to say. Let's put Porto on a map, first of all, before we start talking about it. Where are we talking about?
So Porto represents the north of the country. So it's pretty much close to the northern border in Spain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the capital of the northern region of the country. It's very emblematic because of that.
And why should someone go to Porto?
So Porto is basically one of the oldest European centers. It's a World Heritage Site, I think, since 90s, 95, 96. So the settlement dates back many, many centuries, some Roman empires, even before that. Then there's some interesting things about the city. There's also where J.K. Rowling lives, and she got inspired to write Harry Potter. The oldest library is also there. The oldest library in the world is also there. So also the port wine, as people probably remember, and it's quite also been famous for many reasons. Besides being an old, historical, beautiful city by the river, by the sea, it's also pretty affordable compared to the rest of Europe, which is also great. If you think in Portugal, if you think on flights from the US, Portugal is the first country. Like, it's the shortest flight you can have to Europe. So that's the reason to consider Portugal, and then Porto, because Porto has many direct flights to US too. It's a hub also. So yeah, that's pretty many good reasons to go to Porto and Portugal.
Excellent. And I'm surprised you didn't lead with the port wine, but that's okay. And what kind of itinerary would you recommend for us?
So if you think about a week, you could definitely stay there for a week. There's plenty of things to do, but I think it would be a better use of the time if you spend half of that time there, because Portugal is a very small country, right? You can go from top to bottom in 4 or 5 hours. Some interesting cities like Braga and Guimarães, which is pretty 1 hour, less than an hour distance from Porto, and are pretty much worth the visit. So if I would say visit the Porto region or the Douro region, then I'll say 3 to 3 days in Porto, and then 2 3 days to explore the other 2 or 3 options that we can speak more in detail later.
Okay. And you say that Douro region, we mentioned a river and we mentioned Douro, but we didn't put them together yet and say Porto can be found on the Douro River.
Yes. So basically the Douro road that flows right from Spain, of course, and it's all of the wine. And we're going to talk also about Portuguese wine. And then it ends off in the city of Porto. So it's of the river.
Excellent. And where should we start?
I will say that start in the city center. It also depends where you want also to spend the night, but definitely start the city center downtown. It's pretty a small downtown, beautiful and historical and very walkable. So start visiting the old buildings, the old churches too. There's some beautiful, the São Bento, which is
Portuguese tiles.
Sara.
It's an old train station, and the entrance, the walls and the ceiling are filled with old blue tiles. So that's the traditional Portuguese tile, and it's really beautiful. It depicts scenes of Porto centuries ago, so I think it's worth going there just to see it. And that's the station that you would go to catch a train to the other 2 cities we mentioned, Braga and Guimarães.
Pretty much in the center. The same goes. So there's a Clérigos church. So if you look online, the symbols for the city, there's a church that stands out, Pisa Tower.
It's a tower, yes. We have our own pizza tower.
Yeah, it's a little bit
but it's not
as inclined as pizza.
It's straight.
But it's called Clérigos Church, also worth to visit, and it's pretty much in the center. And that's also close to Lelo Library. So Lelo Library, like I said before, is the oldest library in the world, and that's where it's a touristic place now. So you have to hold the line and pay a ticket to go inside and visit it, because that's the library that inspired J.K. Rowling to do a lot of scenes in the Harry Potter. It's a beautiful, beautiful library, very out of the ordinary.
Okay, now I'm seeing, when I Google it, the oldest library in the world being in Fez, Morocco, but very old library.
Well, I'll have to dispute that.
Well, in Portugal, they tell you it's the oldest library in the world. Let's leave it at that.
That's what Harry Potter said.
Well, and the church you were mentioning with the tower, is that the church that's up on the hill with a great view of the city, or am I thinking of a different church?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting point. So Porto is a very hilly city.
Yes.
Downtown is kind of flat unless you go down to the riverbank, but then it's quite hilly. So there's some points like the church, the Sei Cathedral also, they are in the higher points. So then you have a bigger view of the city.
Okay.
If you are into museums, the best museum in Porto is Serralves. It's actually a house that it's not far from the sea, and they have permanent exhibitions. Sometimes they do other types of exhibitions.
It's an art museum?
It's an art museum.
Contemporary art.
Contemporary art. They often organize activities, and they organize a music festival in summer that is really popular. So it's really worth going there. They have amazing gardens, and the house is built by one of the most famous Portuguese architects. So it's worth paying a visit there on your way to the sea.
Okay. And which architect is that? Because I don't know if I know my famous Portuguese architects, but
I'm pretty sure it's Cisa Vieira.
okay.
Sara is from Braga, another city that we're going to talk about. I'm from Porto, so I did spend a lot of time in that.
And Braga is way, way far away. It's what, an hour or something like that?
Like 40 minutes.
40 minutes. An hour by train.
No.
An hour by train.
For a Portuguese, that's across the country. You never go so far away.
Lisbon is far away, not
It's
Braga.
3 hours. See, another area that you should explore when you go to Porto is the riverbank. So it's called Ribeirinha area. It's beautiful. You have a lot of restaurants and places to hang out. And you can also see the Dom Luís Bridge, which is one of the oldest bridges in Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying Portugal now, not the world. And I think it was a disciple of Eiffel.
Of Eiffel, okay.
Yeah, I think it pretty much resembles the same structure.
Got it. Late 1800s.
Beautiful for pictures in the sunset.
Yes, that's the area to go for sunset.
And you say the river bank, we're on the northern bank of the river, I think is the area you're describing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, the northern bank, because the southern bank is another place to explore, which is another city. So
Mm-hmm.
the river divides in two cities. The other one is called Vila Nova de Gaia, or just shortened Gaia, and then Porto. So technically they are two different cities, although crossing the short bridge, then you don't see much difference by the river banks. But they are technically two different cities, so Gaia and Porto.
Okay. Well, and a lot of the wine that we'd find there, we would find not in Porto itself, but actually across the river.
Yes, so the port wine is definitely port, but it's technically done in Gaia, which is another history because port wine was developed by the British
Mm-hmm.
when they were lacking cherry and they wanted to get another source of fortified wine. So they developed all these cellars and wineries in Portugal. That's why most of the brands, they have English names, like Grams, Taylor's, Fladgate. They're all
Sandman.
English originally. Yeah, Sandman, all English. There's just a couple of them that are Portuguese. But now it's port wine and it's Portuguese. So that's there to explore and enjoy.
Well, and there has been a very close relationship between Portugal and England for many years. And then that certainly didn't get any less so during the Napoleonic years when basically England was helping defend Portugal and Portugal was helping push back the French into France.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I know that when Wellington was at Waterloo in the last battle against Napoleon, what he was really missing, he said, were his Portuguese allies because they were not there, and he knew he could rely on them because they had fought so much together.
That's quite interesting because Portugal and England, this is true, the oldest alliance still in place.
Oh, interesting.
So they're still active. So technically, England is invaded by someone, then Portugal needs to rescue, or the other way around. Still in place.
Interesting. Well, it worked well last time.
Yes.
Excellent. Where else do we want to see in Porto?
Well, a couple of days in Porto, that includes the crossing the bridge, going to Gaia. So even though, like I said, technically it's a different city, but it's just 20 seconds away. So Gaia, that's where you have the cellars, maybe the best views about Porto. If you cross the river and then you can see the Porto from above. So definitely go to the wine cellars. There are many, but all of them have tours and taste experiences and everything. So
Do you have a favorite?
the one I know better is Taylor's.
Okay.
Taylor's has always been high in terms of reviews, and now they have an amazing restaurant called Yetman, which is the top of the hill. And Yetman is now also famous in Europe for one of the biggest wine cellars. It's also a Michelin 2 stars restaurant. So it's a perfect place for people to stay and also to enjoy amazing wine, amazing views, and amazing food because it's a Michelin restaurant. So Yetman is the name and it belongs to Taylor's.
Okay.
But also they have the tours of their cellars, which is, I recommend it.
Well, and not everybody's going to be familiar with port wine. You mentioned that it was a fortified wine, meaning there's more alcohol put in after it's halfway between distilled and fermented because you put in some extra alcohol at the end. It's a sweet dessert wine. There are a couple different types. Do you have a favorite type of port?
Yeah, so fortified wine came along because there was a need to transport wine by boat a long time ago, and they found out that just adding extra alcohol will help to conserve. But then after the transport, being on the barrels and the movement and everything, it became the taste and the flavor will be enhanced. So that's when they started to explore, and then fortified wine became a thing. And one of the most famous fortified wines was Madeira wine. So pretty much similar to the way it's produced like port wine, but it's done in Madeira Island. So it's in the middle of the Atlantic island. It belongs to Portugal, but it was on the way to America. So I don't know if you know, but I think George Washington's Declaration of Independence by the US was done toasting with Madeira wine.
I did not know that.
I think there was two moments, and then later on in the Congress, they also used Madeira wine. That was probably the first fortified wine that was enjoyed in the US, but now port wine just became widely known now. But it's the same. So you add alcohol and then you age it. So that's another thing. You need to age it in wooden barrels. So it takes years. So you have port wines 20, 30, 40 years, and they become better and better with time, which is the opposite with normal wine, which doesn't really improve that much with time, as much as the fortified wine does. And then dessert wines and a lot of sweet wines that I also use. But fortified wine is basically this addition of alcohol to the first fermentation that is done from grapes.
Okay. And if I said ruby port or a tawny port, which would you prefer?
I'll definitely go for tawny.
Oh, so would I. Okay. Right answer.
For the last couple of years, they've also been doing white port wine, which is not traditional one, but it's not as good.
Okay.
To be honest.
Fair enough. Well, you mentioned boats, and I think that's one of the interesting things about the river there in the Douro is you can still see those barrels of wine coming down here. You mentioned these are the cellars. These are not the vineyards. The vineyards are upriver.
Yes.
And you still have the relatively small boats, just like they were hundreds of years ago, I imagine.
Yeah, you're right. Vineyards are around the Douro River, up the river, and then they're just the cellars when they store, when they finish. So, yeah, so you can actually do tours, and you can still travel on those small boats.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
The 4 bridges, 5 bridges tours where you just go along the river.
Only as far as 4 bridges. Okay.
But then you can also do the beautiful Douro River tour where you go up the river, up to the wineries. You have a tasting experience, and then you come back by train, also enjoying the beautiful views of the river trip.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned that the beautiful Douro River Valley. I should mention also that the Douro River Valley is terraced. It's a narrow river, V-shaped, with wines terraced up the sides, and the terraces are so old that the entire valley is a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Yes, and it's a protected area, so you can only do port wine. You can only call port wine if it's done there. There were some years, and I think that still exists in the market, some countries, like maybe Australia, trying to make some port wine.
We make port wine here too, and we call it port wine.
I didn't want to say it well. I wanted to be nice.
You can get champagne here too. We're equal opportunity in terms of that. Yeah,
That's
which you
true,
couldn't
that's
call it
true.
that in Europe, obviously. You said you can only make port wine officially in Europe if it's from that region, but there are also other wines that are made in that region. It's not just port. So if you're not a fan of port, there are other wines that are being produced in that region as well.
Yes, so that's another interesting point. So a lot of people are not aware that Portugal has prize-winning wines and specific grapes, only Portuguese grapes. So it's common when you go to Portugal, and you don't find always a Cabernet Sauvignon or Sauvignon Blanc because we have our own grape varieties like Touriga, Touriga Nacional. So you can drink amazing produced wine in Portugal. Of course, you can also have the other American wine together, but it's not a huge wine producer because it's a small country. But in terms of quality, it can definitely dispute prices with a lot of other French and other varieties. So yeah, so it's a huge wine producing country, a lot for domestic consumption because Portuguese people do drink decent amounts of wine. That's another thing when you tell people, yeah, you have amazing food and amazing wine and Portuguese wine. That's why it can also be as affordable and as enjoyable as the wines if you go, for example, to France or even to Australia.
I should say that if you enjoy the wine portion of this conversation, then I've actually done an episode of Amateur Traveler on the cruise. I did a Viking cruise up the Douro River, and I'll find the episode number for that and put it in the show notes so that you can listen to that if you're more interested in. That'll go in a little more detail in terms of the Douro experience there. And that was a week-long cruise, and it's a short river, so it's 3 days up and 3 days back, sort of thing, as far as Salamanca in Spain.
Since we're talking about wines, so maybe I can talk a little bit about the wine that characterizes my region, which is Minho. So Braga is the capital of the Minho region, and it's called Vinho Verde. You probably know about it, Chris.
I tasted it when I was there, absolutely.
So it's a great wine for a summer hot day, so sparkling and a little bit acidic. And I actually have an uncle, he's my father's brother, and he's a wine producer. He produces Vinho Verde. Maybe worth a visit.
Well, what is the name of his vineyards? Let's tell people that.
He has just a small vineyard, but I'm sure that there are bigger vineyards that you can visit. I didn't do my research on that, sorry.
Okay.
But he's a very small producer, so I don't think that would be to visit. But there are bigger producers there that probably open their doors and you can visit and see the wine production.
Well, and one question for you. I don't know Portuguese, as we've already established. The name of the wine, does it translate to something?
Yes, so Vinho Verde means green wine.
Okay, that's what I was thinking it would.
And it comes from immature, like green of not being mature.
Yeah.
Not green as in color, but...
Yeah, call it new wine, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We saw that in Portugal, and somewhere else I've been in the world recently is known for their new wine, and I'm drawing a complete blank, and I've been way too many places in the last couple of years. And this is when it's a disadvantage.
It is a different experience. So not everyone will like it, but then if you like it, you really like it because it's a completely different wine experience.
Okay, excellent. What else should we do?
All right, so maybe we should give it a chance for Sara to talk about Braga. So to go to Braga, you can take a train, super comfortable from the São Bento station, and in 40 minutes you'll be Braga downtown.
Yeah, I think Braga is a great city, especially if you're into churches. So Porto has a few, but if you want to see churches, go to Braga. We are famous for churches. It's a very old city. I think 2,000 years of history. Mm-hmm. It was first established by the Romans, and it was called Bracara Augusta in commemoration of Caesar Augustus, Emperor. So it's that old. And the best and biggest and oldest church that you should definitely go to is the Sé Cathedral. This cathedral is even older than Portugal. So its foundation was started before Portugal was founded. So it's really an incredible old cathedral, and all of the history of that city is basically summarized there. And they have an amazing museum. I went there as a kid, again, a school tour, but it was pretty impressive, the amount of artifacts that they have, religious artifacts and some mysterious stories that they tell you. It's pretty incredible. Also, another iconic place in Braga is Bom Jesus Temple. So basically what is popular about Bom Jesus is the staircase that goes the hill. So it's the highest point in Braga, so it has a good view of the city. And it's 500 stairs. I've counted them, and it's a really nice walk up. So they have lots of different little chapels, and it's good, I think, to go with a tour guide to explain to you.
Mm-hmm. And do you recommend any particular tours?
No.
Okay.
Living there, I didn't have a need to do a tour, so
sure.
I'm just saying because
your third grade teacher you're recommending would be the tour.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. The church is pretty beautiful. Everyone that gets married in Braga, they like to do the ceremony there. So in summer, you'll probably bump into a wedding. And there's like a little romantic park with a little lake where you can do some boat rides and take some nice pictures. And you're going to see lots of people, locals, doing exercise. So you see people running up and down the stairs. It's it's pretty nice to see the locals during their daily life.
And just to make sure I am thinking of the same church that you are, this is a church that is spelled Bom Jesus. So good Jesus of the mountain. Not the other Jesus, but the good Jesus.
Yes.
Very specific.
Very specific.
We don't
Okay.
want any bad Jesus, just good ones. A third place, this one you would have to drive there. So it's a monastery a little bit outside of the city center, but I think it's really worth the visit because it's like a Baroque style monastery. And the interesting thing is the area around it. So Braga it was very strong in terms of religious orders.
Okay.
So most of the land still belongs to the church. And this is, I think, the best preserved monastery in terms of the land that is around. So they still have fields and fields where they plant things, that they have a beautiful garden, a forest. So if you're into nature, maybe this is a place to go. More towards the end of the day, walk a little bit and relax in that nice environment. I think that's it for churches.
Yes. And that's already a full day in Braga, probably.
Okay.
I was telling João that I think one day is not enough for Braga.
Well, you can spend more if you want. There's more, of course, there's more places to visit. There's some museums too. The downtown is also very nice, walkable.
The area around the Sé Cathedral, it's full of shops and it's a very old part of town. So it's really nice just to walk around. There's a garden as well. I think it's just behind the Sé Cathedral that is called Santa Barbara. And it's a very nice, very neat garden with flowers, and people love going there taking pictures with their loved ones. Another nice place to take pictures, romantic pictures.
That's very Instagrammable. So that could be one day in Braga, or two if you want. If you're really into religious places, then Braga definitely takes a couple of days.
The other thing that I'm seeing in Braga with the Roman history is that there's also an interesting festival in town.
Glad that he mentioned that. Every year during the summertime, the city council puts up this Roman festival where they reenact the city life during the Roman times. And downtown in the old city center, you can see plenty of vendors, and there's music festival. There's quite a lot of activities to be done. I think it's a great time to be in Braga and have a little bit of the feeling of how the city looked like during those times. And they really take it to the last detail, because when I was there this year, I went to one of the vendors and I asked her if she had a product. I don't remember what it was. And she said, no, we don't have it for sale because they didn't have it during the Roman times. So they really take it down to that detail. Yeah. So I think it's a very good experience. And also another great festival that is both in Porto and Braga is Saint John, or São João. And it's in June, and it's a great night.
So Portugal being, it's religious heritage, so there's a lot of patron saints that are celebrated throughout the country, and the most important ones are St. John's and St. Peter. St. Peter is celebrated in Lisbon, and for some reason in Gaia, and then St. John is celebrated in Porto and in Braga. So those are the main places where they are celebrated. And then doing the celebrations, it's a couple of days, but it's essentially like an afternoon, evening on the 23rd of June. There's a lot of things going on, from plastic hammers when you go around and hit people in the head, like people that you don't know in the head, or like a garlic and putting the garlic in people's faces, the smell.
João said afternoon and evening. I would say it's morning. Evening and then early morning.
Yes.
Next day. It's a whole day party.
Night. And then he also released those lanterns that you actually see Asia, but it's also the paper lantern that you release in the air. So there's a lot of things going on. There's fireworks, the biggest fireworks night in the country in the year. So yeah, it's the best night to be in the city. Both cities, Porto or Braga, they both celebrate.
And I'd say one of the best things about this festival is also the food and the drink. So the tradition is to drink red wine, and eat grilled sardines. So the whole city stinks with grilled fish.
Not stink, smells.
No, it actually smells good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's barbecued fish and vegetables and potatoes and everything.
Yeah, all washed down with red wine.
We should say that this is a festival to St. John the Baptist, and so far as I know, there are no biblical records of him hitting people over the head with hammers or thrusting garlic in people's faces. So we just want to vindicate him of that.
That was a marketing stunt created some years ago, but it's working and now people enjoy hitting people that you don't know on the street. It's an experience. Just imagine yourself passing by someone that you don't know, and the first thing you do is hit him in the head.
It's a good way to release the frustration, you know?
Well, not too much.
To be fair, St. John did it more theologically. So, excellent. And you were taking us over to the city that I cannot say that starts with a G.
Guimarães, where Portugal was founded, because it was the last resistance to the Moor. And anyway, so Guimarães, again, 40 minutes away by train from Porto. And then you have probably the most emblematic castle in the country. It's there in Guimarães, so it's where probably should start. But there's many castles and palaces to visit, like the Duke de Bragança Palace, because that's still where theoretically our monarchy, because we still have a monarchy in Portugal, not active, but we have a monarch, which is Duke de Bragança. And then you have the Olive Square, you have the convent, it's Misericordia Convent. So there's a lot of places to visit, also connected with the monarchy and the religion, the churches too.
Mm-hmm. Not a big town.
I'd say it's same size as Braga.
It's smaller.
Smaller?
I think it's smaller,
okay.
yeah.
There's a rivalry here between the cities.
Yeah,
so I'm not
there's
sure
actually a
about
rivalry, a soccer, very, very aggressive rivalry, to be honest. So whenever these two cities play together, there's always rocks being thrown at each other. And
oh my!
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Still very medieval. I think
very medieval.
That's in very medieval times when they play so against each other. But I'd say Guimarães is roughly the same as Braga, maybe a little bit smaller. So again, super easy to walk around and visit. And then I actually recommend that maybe later in the day to do there's a cable car up the hill, the Penha Hill. Penha Hill is a famous hill in Guimarães. Then you have an amazing view of the city. You can do also some small hikes. There's some trails there if you want to go a little bit more outdoorish. Definitely a good day spent in Guimarães. It's well worth the trip.
And for the record, Braga is more than twice as large as Guimarães.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, well, whether larger is better, I did not say, but it is large. So go to the castle, walk to the hill for the view. Anything else specifically we want to do when we're there?
I'll definitely visit the castle and the palace.
And the palace. Okay, got it.
You need to go to at least 3 places. So the castle, the palace, and the hill, the Penha Hill.
Okay.
With those 3 covered, you have already a full day experience. Then going back to Porto, I was telling you about the Diva cruise, the week one. But there's one-day cruises.
Right.
So people can just go and then come back on the same day, or spend the night and then come back the next day. So that's something you can probably fit in a week holiday in Porto in the north. So definitely worth it. It's Viking. There's also another company called Douro Azul, which is also highly recommended to use.
Okay, excellent. And that is more of a day cruise, the Douro Azul?
They have everything.
Okay, got it.
They have all the options. They have 4 bridges too, which is a couple of hours. Yeah, all the options with them, but there's many companies just to choose from.
Excellent. Are there other things we want to recommend in this week-long itinerary in Douro and Porto?
If you have an extra day or if you go to extra places, then Aveiro, so that's a city south. The Braga and Guimarães are both north of Porto. Then if you move south, there's a city by the sea called Aveiro, which is a little bit smaller. It used to be a fisherman village. Now it grew a little bit more, so now it's a city, but still a small city. And it has a beautiful riverbank architecture with many different colors and old wooden houses. Yeah, I think it would be interesting. I spent there a lot of time because I used to sail, so I liked a lot of competitions, a lot of races in Aveiro, so I always love to go there. 40 minutes away from Porto. So we think that you can go and then even come back for lunch if you want. So definitely recommend that as an option. And then just before forgetting, so originally I was born in Porto, but I lived all my life, or most of my life, in Matosinhos, which is, I'd say, a sister city.
It's a satellite
So
city.
if you move from Porto to the seaside, you have Foz do Douro, which is also a nice place to go in Porto. But then Foz do Douro is a small area, and as soon as you cross the street, then you enter Matosinhos. So the most of the beach area is actually Matosinhos, the city. And Matosinhos is interesting because it's fisherman's city too, and they have an amazing fish market. So that's also recommend for people to visit. And also you can eat like fresh fish, and it's our specialty.
They have some pretty good restaurants, right, for seafood?
Seafood and fish restaurant. And there's a couple of fish festivals also going on there, a week-long seafood festival also in Matosinhos. So
do you have a particular restaurant that you would recommend for seafood, or a particular area that I would find a good restaurant?
I recommend Mauritania. There's 2 Mauritanias in Matosinhos, one in Matosinhos and another one in Lessa, but I recommend Mauritania. But you can definitely find 4 or 5 high-quality restaurants by the sea. Pro is another one. But let's go for Mauritania just to make it easier for people. Mauritania is...
Excellent. People find it helpful when you give them more specific. And as long as we're talking about food, again, as we go back to Porto, you said go back for lunch. Where am I going?
So let's go back to history. Let's go back in time. So when there was the discovery period, when Portugal decided to become travelers, which is not happening anymore, but back in the time when we were doing our discoveries and going to fight wars elsewhere, the king decided for people, for the seamen to take the best food. And the best food was the food from the animals. So all the remainings, all the leftovers from the animals were left behind, and they took like best part of the animal. So that remaining, especially from pork, I think that was what was more used back then, became the most famous dish in the north of Portugal called tripas, a modo do Porto, which is basically...
Tripas Porto fashion?
Yeah, it's like pork inside, cooked in a... I don't know how to describe, but it's quite a dish. It is famous there. So it's called tripas. If you just call tripas, people will know.
How do you spell that?
Tripas is Tripa.
Okay.
Tripas means tripe.
Which is intestines.
Yes. So that's the main, most famous dish in Porto.
Got it.
And then you have bacalhau, which is the Portuguese main dish. You can eat all across the country. Porto has some specific dishes. The bacalhau can be cooked in 1,000 different ways. Bacalhau azedo pipo.
Bacalhau à Braga.
And bacalhau à Braga. So those are the 2 probably typical ways of cooking bacalhau.
And I don't know bacalhau.
You don't know bacalhau. So bacalhau is codfish.
Oh, okay. Got it. All right.
Strange tradition because we don't have bacalhau caught fish in our coast. It's actually caught in the North Sea, close to Norway.
Okay.
But it became a main fish dish for centuries.
Huh.
We are specialized in cooking bacalhau in many different ways. It's salted cod fish. You just have to put it in water for some time, and then you can cook it in 1,000 different ways.
So you're saying you're a sea-going fishing country whose specialty dish is salted fish from someplace else?
Explorers we were, right?
Ah, okay. left over from the days of Prince Henry the Navigator. Okay.
Yes.
I think you're the country in the world that consumes the most salted codfish, right?
Yes.
Huh. I would have guessed that was a country that actually caught a lot of salted codfish. That's interesting.
Crazy because it's not enough, so we need to buy it.
Right, sure.
Portugal has very particularities. I think it's like one of the second or third rice eaters per capita in the world. And we have our thing.
Well, and Portugal, of course, being big traders for a long time, being one of the first of the European countries that was really trading with India, and for a long time the only one. So, in fact, that's why the Spanish had to head off in the other direction where they bumped into a continent. But which worked okay for them for a while, but interesting.
We were also that way afterwards, and that's why we had Brazil for some time.
Sure.
And it's funny because in Asia, everything has chili, and everything is chili, and in India, but chili is not native from there. was the Portuguese that brought chili from South America to Asia. And
Huh.
now it's everywhere in Asia. So yeah, like crazy. And we don't use the chili ourselves. We use pepper mostly in our dishes in Portugal. But someone decided to bring chili to Asia. And now everything is spicy over there.
Huh. Interesting.
Right. And then let's talk about maybe the custard pie. It's not like a main dish, but it's more. It's
Dessert.
more. Yeah, it's just a
That's our
dessert.
traditional dessert.
The egg custard pie.
Oh,
Well,
sure.
it's not a dessert because you don't eat it
Oh, yeah,
at the
that's
end
true.
of a meal. You eat it as a snack. When you go out with friends, you meet at a coffee shop and you always have an espresso and maybe a custard pie on the side.
I can live with that. I like the custard pies.
Yes.
This is pastel de nata?
Yes.
Yes.
Pastel de nata.
Very good.
Yeah,
Your accent is good.
Well,
Yes,
it's
I
the
think
only
I can-
one I've gotten correct tonight, so I think law of averages really is what caught up with me there. You can't be wrong all the time.
I can still remember that from your visit to Portugal. And then I think it's also worth to refer francesinha. So francesinha is a very
Little
interesting.
French girl.
Yeah, it's the direct translation would be like little French girl. Nobody knows exactly where it came from. It was a Portuguese guy living in France. Maybe there's some myths about it. But francesinha is a very, I would say, intensive dish. It's not for the
High calorie dish.
Yes, so it's
Okay.
basically layers of different kinds of meat and processed meat and ham and cheese and everything, and then fully cover of a thick layer of cheese, and
And
then
then a special sauce that no one tells the secret. So
Yes.
each house has their own special sauce.
Huh.
They don't share it with anyone.
it's tomato-based, very spicy sauce on top of it. So it's a proper caloric meal,
Like
but
2,000
it's super.
calories. So you eat one
then
once and that's it.
It's very tasty, and you need to find a proper place also to eat it, because I can recommend Quint and I can recommend Cufra. So Cufra. That's probably the best place to have a francesinha in Porto today.
Okay. And I hear it being called a sort of sandwich only because there's no better term for it. It was the phrase that was being
So
used.
weird. Yeah,
Yes.
good. You
Yes.
never thought about it
That's
like
true.
that, but yeah.
There's bread inside that too, but you don't
Yeah,
see
yeah.
it.
Right.
So that's,
It is like a sandwich.
It's not
now
like you're
that
going
you're
to pick it up and
saying.
eat it with your fingers, though.
no,
No.
definitely not. It's a garf and fork.
Excellent. Anything else that people should know before they go to Porto?
They don't need to be worried about the English. Portuguese people speak English quite easily, and they can find everywhere. And we are very friendly with language. Even if you don't speak English properly, they'll find a way to communicate. So no worries with that. You don't need to be Portuguese perfect like you're trying to be. Your Portuguese has been more than enough to go along. In terms of transportation, also Porto has a beautiful subway now, and it's above the ground subway, so you can even enjoy the views. So technically it's not a subway, but it's like a
A superway.
overground,
Tram.
like a tram or like. So yeah, transport is great in Porto.
There's also an old tram that goes around the historical
true.
center.
Those are beautiful.
I know Lisbon has quite a lot.
Hmm.
Porto has only one.
Oh, I didn't realize Porto had only one. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay. I have a picture of two different ones from Porto.
You have?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a new one.
you had another tram beside the riverbank one. Is it? There's one that goes up the hill, but that's like just to transport you there. In terms of transportation system, one that crosses all the city, as far as we know, there's only that one
It's
by the
possible
river.
I have a picture from Lisbon has crept into my Porto pictures, but
Yeah.
I literally have a picture that has two different tram cars in it. The same sort of pretty tram cars that you'd see in Lisbon. Excellent. Well, as we go to wrap this up, if I told you were standing at the prettiest spot in Porto, or the region, I'll give you the whole region, where are you standing and what are you looking at?
Most
Maybe Gaia looking at
choose.
Porto.
Looking at Porto, okay.
Especially with the sunset or even the metal bridge.
The Don Luis.
Yeah,
The
Don Luis.
Okay. That's the one you said was done by a student of Eiffel.
I really like that area. It might be very crowded.
I would choose by the city hall, looking down. So the city hall is like in a higher point.
It's up near the church we were talking about previously.
Yes. So looking down, and then in a St. John celebration, for me,
Oh, yeah.
that's the moment that I really enjoy being in that city.
So it's pretty right up until somebody hits you with a plastic hammer.
Yes, trying to side away from all those aggressors.
You should have your
Friendly.
own. You should have your own,
Got it.
to
Okay.
defend yourself.
Have
If you have
your
a
own.
big one, so the trick is if you have a really big one, people like look at you. Maybe I shouldn't hit that guy because he's going to come back with a big hammer. So
Yeah.
carrying one is enough to attract a lot of
Dissuade people.
friendly aggressors. Let me say friendly guys because they hit you with a smile. So it's very, very particular.
One thing that makes you laugh and say only in Porto.
A waiter serving you and making fun of you at the same time. Porto waiters have a specific
They're
temper.
very ironic and
Yes.
dark humor.
Yes.
So they will make a joke out of your expenses without smiling. But
Yes.
I'm guessing that they're just laughing on the inside.
Yeah, they won't be shy of just saying, yeah, whatever, like, and comment something about you. So, yeah, that's definitely all in Porto.
I was just going to say that riding the subway is an experience in itself because of the local people that ride as well. So we are very loud people. Not as loud as Italians, I think, but you'll probably get an old lady just starting conversation with you. And if you don't answer, she's just gonna, turn to the other side and speak to someone else. So that's pretty common to happen.
It's a good experience.
And if I asked you to summarize Porto in just 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
History?
Okay.
Saudade.
Oh, so we didn't speak about Fado.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah, we didn't speak about Fado. But Fado is probably more symbolic in Lisbon. You do have Fado in Porto, but it's
The Fado music.
Fado. Saudade means to miss someone and to be homesick and everything. So, yeah, it's quite
It's kind of
sad
the
and
Portuguese
powerful.
country music. You lost your true love.
Yes.
So that's like the sad music. There's plenty of happy and danceable music that we have in all regions, but Fado is the most international, the most recognized.
And it's connected with discoveries when people just went across the world and discover and then leave all your love behind.
Oh, see, I had never made that connection. Interesting.
Yes. Yeah, Fado has to do with that story of just going and to work or just travel and explore.
Yeah, because we're a fisherman's country as well, going to the sea and then not knowing if your husband would come back at the end of the day. So.
Well, and when you did go off on those big voyages of discovery, your chances of coming back were not 100% by any chance.
And sometimes they just got like it so much what they got, they didn't want to come back anyway, right? So
Okay, so that was 2 words. What was the third word?
I would say to convince people affordable.
Affordable. Okay, excellent.
We spoke about so many good things that people enjoy, and I think it's important to know that compared to Europe, we're pretty much below the average in terms of costs and prices. And so, yeah, so definitely come because you're going to have an amazing experience, an affordable one too. So
Excellent. Well, thank you both. And I'm going to butcher your name again. I'm just going to say Reis and Sara Silva from footprintnomads.com. And if we wanted to send people to your website, to your best post about Porto, where are we sending them?
yeah, if you go to the main page, you already have some way to find some information there. So yeah, main page, you'll find it there.
Okay. And I'll look that up and put a link to the information about Porto in the show notes for this episode. Thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us your love of Porto.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
It's been an amazing opportunity. I've been listening to you for so many years, so it was an honor to be here. So thank you for the opportunity.
In news of the community, I had a recent review in Apple Podcasts from Rateburger from Australia, full of helpful insights. Fantastic podcasts. The few episodes I've heard so far are exactly the kind of useful conversations you want to have with someone before you travel somewhere new. Thoughtful first-hand travel advice, the opposite of so much online travel content, which just regurgitates the same info about obvious attractions, shows the same color-saturated stock shots, and offers no opinions or insights into anything. Really glad I found this podcast. Well, you made my day as well. So thanks so much, Rateburger from Australia, for that review.
And then I heard from Sean about the episode we did on Nagoya. We got a couple things wrong there. Hi, my name is Sean. I'm a longtime listener of this podcast. I've been living in Nagoya for 15 years. I was surprised to see a Nagoya episode, as it's not a tourist destination at all. A few things. First, I was happy you were able to pronounce Nagoya correctly. Second, your host failed to mention the Nagoya International Center website. The site is useful for information on getting around, events, and much more. I wouldn't visit Nagoya before going to this website first. Lastly, Toyota never made textiles. It did and does make industrial looms. Toyota Motors is a separate company. So I think we frustrated Sean a little bit with that episode, but Sean, I thank you for your feedback and correction. And with that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have a question for me, you can send it to host@amateurtraveler.com like Sean did, or you can send a review like Rateburger did at Apple Podcasts, which helps people find the show. Don't forget mytravelcreditcard.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
See one more cathedral, I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be